I have started to refer to myself as a deprogrammer. I know that in Christianity we use terms that believers are more familiar with, like inner healing ministry, deliverance ministry. But what I have learned to do for people at this point, I'd say, goes a little bit beyond the traditional understanding of both of those terms. So what people would typically understand deliverance ministry as is there's devils, there are demons, there are spiritual problems and just like your book is talking about, they can strangle people, cause physical afflictions, lock up money, lock up relationships, opportunities going down the drain, not because of anything the person is doing in the natural, but because there's spiritual bondage that is sitting on top of them or in their body or whatever it is, and they need to clear that in the name of Jesus. On the other side, we have inner healing, where people have trauma, wounds, they have hurts from the past, disappointments. They've been sinned against. People have been victimized under certain acts of injustice from childhood onward. And many times we come to Christ maybe later in life, we don't know what to do with all of the hurt that we endured up to a certain point, or even after we get saved. Sometimes there's a lot more hurt waiting us, and people need to revisit that and allow the Lord to touch those broken places. The Bible says Jesus came to bind up the brokenhearted. But at the cross section of both of these conversations, you have a deep need in society right now, which is for the reason that things have been perpetrated against the world that we live in that we were not told were being perpetrated against it. Wow. And it is coming out, but it is coming out from voices that are not being legitimized by mainstream media. It is coming out in ways that it's leaking, but the truth is being intentionally opposed. Wow. And I would suggest that this comes by way of what has been done by satanic cults and what has been done by actual governments, including our own here in the United States, to destroy people, to systematically violate them with all kinds of crimes against humanity, to introduce traumas that are so extensive. They create dissociative identity disorder in people. Wow. And then take dissociated identities and program those parts of the person's humanity to do certain jobs, functions, tasks, and basically mind control the person for the rest of their lives until that begins to break. And what we have been doing is serving this population of people that have been under mind control actively. They are absolutely in bondage to demonic powers, but at the same time, there are extensive levels of brokenness in their soul and spirit, and then into the body. And we have to address the whole thing. And so we call it deprogramming.
Man, deprogramming, that is such a perfect description. You know, you just said that, like, even governmental programs, not only satanic cults, guys, but governmental programming that creates so much trauma, such extensive trauma, that creates dissociative identities. For people that don't know what that means, explain what that is.
So we could start with a basic concept of abuse. Let's say we're talking about traditional physical abuse. So you have a child, they are young, maybe 4 years old, and they're not acting so good, or maybe they're not doing anything wrong at all, but they have a parent that's very angry or just very drunk. And something happens, so there will be now a process of abuse that takes place physically. Maybe a belt comes out, some kind of object, and the child knows, I'm about to get injured. I will be hurt, and I am not an agent in my own redemption here. The child is too small to run away. The child is too weak. They cannot overpower the adult. They will simply be subject to whatever punishment that they are about to meet. And so instead of retreating, like maybe an adult would just run away from a threat, that child has to retreat in a different way. They have to retreat in their mind.
Wow.
So what happened is that child will begin a process of dissociation where they're presenting soul consciousness. It just begins to run down the hallway of the mind. It's like, I got to get out of here, but I can't physically leave, so I'm going to mentally leave. And as they run down the hallway of their mind and run into the subconscious, they are able to escape the event of the abuse. They do get away, but they get away in their mind. And what happens in a process of escaping trauma through dissociation is that a part of the soul will leave, but a part of the soul stays present.
Yes.
And the part of the soul stays present onboards the memory of the abuse and the experience, while maybe the part of the child that is primary, maybe the part that goes to school, maybe the part that, thinks they have a loving parent, but, just not right now. It is escaping that situation. And then once it's over, what will happen is that primary presenting child will actually come back to the surface. And then the part that endured the abuse will take on an identity, maybe bad boy. Now, bad boy is going to go down and maybe deep into the subconscious and stay there. And the only time bad boy comes out is when we've been a bad boy and we're going to get abused. So you have this learned method of coping with a traumatic environment where we are using the dissociative ability that is inherent to all humans, but it becomes a problem because now we are also creating separate identities within ourselves. One of us is the good boy that dad loves and, goes to school and has friends, and the other one's the bad boy that gets beat. Later on, that person may find that they are in a session with a minister or whatever, and bad boy comes forward and they have to reconcile all of the pain and trauma this part of them carries. That would be what I would call a soul part. Now, when you talk about dissociative identity disorder, what you have is significant repetitive trauma, typically before the age of 7, producing a series of strategic dissociations in an individual to survive trauma. Well, what happens with some of these satanic cults and these government groups is that because they know people will do this to survive, they apply strategic abuse with the intent of shattering the mind. And then they have professionals that not only are present as the mind is being shattered through extremely traumatic events, but then follow that up with processes to program the parts that are shattering with jobs and identities. So there's an intent that comes behind this natural God-given ability, because God knew this was going to be a tough world. He gives every human the ability to dissociate. And this is evidenced by what I call a dissociative continuum. At the light end of that scale is daydreaming. Daydreaming is something everybody can do no matter how much trauma they have. That's a dissociation. That's also evidence that dissociation is inherent to human design. But when it is required for a lot of traumatic experiences, it moves a person into dysfunction, because that dissociation over time begins to interrupt normal cognitive processes. And that's why we end up at dissociative identity disorder, when you have all of these strategic dissociations leading to completely independent personalities that have split off of the core soul, living within a single body, all expressing different viewpoints, worldviews, jobs, and so they lean on that to then put mind control into play.
Okay, question, Dan. I could sit here and listen to you for hours. So at the very basic, when you have like a bad boy identity that forms because you're a bad boy and it forms out of that trauma, can that lead to then later on that bad boy acting like a bad boy, becoming a drug addict, becoming an alcoholic, and all of that? And also, does that type of the dissociative identity that's formed, and when it's used strategically by like a government or a cult, is that what leads to someone becoming a school shooter or an assassin, shooting at the president, or things like that? Is that the beginning layer to do the mental and mind control programming for a person to end up being used by the cult or the government for those types of insidious assignments?
Well, yeah, absolutely. I mean, this is how so many of the things that we are watching in our world that don't seem to make sense, but they are clearly happening, actually do make sense. What we don't realize is how extensive the programming to our world has been. I mean, there are entire communities nearby certain military bases, for for instance, the whole community has been made into a project. So virtually everybody that comes out of some of these certain communities they're all programmed. Many of the people that are involved in underground military installations all have programming. Anybody that's been part of black ops in the military projects that require more like super soldier abilities, well, super soldiers are pretty much all put through programs and projects for the sake of mind control. Because when you dissociate a person, you unlock abilities that are not inherent to a person's humanity when they're in a solid state. So you can, like, for instance, have a programmer that splits apart and says, okay, we want a lot of we want this part to have no emotion, right? So they split apart. They make sure the emotion during that shattering event is isolated somewhere else in the person's humanity, and they get a piece of soul that is virtually devoid of emotion. They said, this is the one, we're going to use this for the delta programming. So you have alpha programming, beta programming, you have delta programming, chi programming, and we could talk about some of those, but like delta is assassin programming, typically in a system where you have it. So the deltas, they're all trained to kill, and to kill with poison and with weapons, knives, guns, to be shooters. Whatever it is, they'll often be trained on military installations or maybe three-letter agencies which run some of the project people through it. These soul parts will have training in weapons and all that stuff, and so they will have a place in the subconscious where they sit, and once a trigger comes, that can then come forward, present, and act out. It can act out in a shooting, a stabbing, violent crime. Sometimes people will have parts of them that have been programmed inadvertently come to the surface untriggered by their handlers, and that can be sometimes problematic because they will act out in inappropriate times that weren't maybe planned for. There's a lot of men that sit in prisons today. They are programmed, and they are sitting in prisons because they have acted out violent crimes because of parts that have been, they're inclined to go that route, and so
disposition. Yeah,
disposition. Thank you. Yes.
Yeah.
And so there's a lot of this that's actually defining some of the things that we see in society. They do the same thing. What they do with sex slavery is they program what they call the beta alters, and they often give them things like kitten programming, and they will actually program them with animals sometimes, and those parts will then be basically mind controlled to act out sexually on cue and with what we call triggers. And sometimes
stop right there for 1 second, Dandy. So you saying that when they take these children and traffic them, they torture them and torment them to break them so they disassociate, and then they can then take those different identities that come from the disassociation to program them in to then become sex slaves to do certain things, or labor slaves to do certain things, because they're now associating those tasks with the different identities that were created by the trauma?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Not only that, I mean, they program people to be politicians, to run major corporations, to be in school boards, and also over universities, and ministers in the pulpit. They use these techniques to program people to do all kinds of things, and then they install them in different areas of society and handle them in those positions. Wow. So we actually have a very manipulated reality that we navigate. And for those of us that were not part of the system, we have no idea what's going on. And for those of us that are actually part of the system, many of us are, again, completely dissociated to the fact that we are part of this control network. That's the mystery of dissociation. And so what we have now, and I'll just say this, is an environment where the Lord is actually working to begin to interrupt mind control. There's actually a lot of people that have been targeted in this way. The Lord is starting to break things down. The Lord is actually starting to highlight that this is what is the problem people haven't been able to put their finger on. And now people are beginning to, in more and more numbers, look for help, which is where our ministry is kind of flourishing, because we are absolutely being bombarded from every side and many nations with people that come from these backgrounds. They're like, I couldn't understand this, I couldn't understand this. And then I started meeting parts, and then I started learning that I had this memory, and I don't know what to do. And then they have all of the demonic attachments, which get highly complex. And because ritual abuse allows for a degree of complexity and spiritual bondage to go off the charts. And that is what we have been tackling with the Lord. I mean, that is really our mission field at BRIDE Ministries.
How prevalent is this in society? I mean, you're talking about they who is satanic, cults, covens, witches, sorcerers, but also governmental level programming, governmental level, strategic assigning of tasks to disassociated persons. How prevalent is this in society? People think, oh, that's just like a rarity. It only happens in the corner. It's just a small segment of society. I mean, really, how prevalent is it?
It's way more than we would be comfortable actually accepting, Katie. It's way more than I think anyone's fully ready to accept. The truth is, there was a massive response to some of this breaking out back in the 90s. They called it the satanic panic. People actually began to get their memories back and expose some of the stuff.
Wow.
And there was a massive move against it. They created something that's completely fiction called the False Memory Syndrome Foundation. They really tried to suppress what was really coming out, which was that, these satanic cults are real, government projects are real, people are really being hurt, there are real crimes against humanity, and we're at a point in history now where nothing's going to stop the tidal wave. We are actually, I believe, on the precipice of a great awakening.
Wow.
And that great awakening is actually going to mean that the reality that's been hidden by dissociation in so many individuals, way more than we are going to be comfortable talking about, begins to break forth and come to the surface. And that reality, which is their reality that's completely dissociated, is going to change the way we understand the world we even live in, because this reality includes the hollow earth, it includes the underground military bases, it includes off-planet, the secret space program, it includes the secret government projects. I mean, the reality of the Antarctica base, the full extent of the work that Mengele did, who really did train many programmers all over the world, including here in the United States, post-World War II. Like, there is so much that is, okay, yeah, we want to call that conspiracy, even hybrids. And, I could tell you a lot of these underground bases where they have people, the employees are all mind controlled, but that's where they are engineering their hybrids, as it is written in the Bible, as it was in the days of Noah, so shall it be in the days of the coming of the Son of Man. I promise you, they are engineering hybrids. They're half human, half whatever, underground, like the very soil we walk on in this country and others offshore. And people are coming to me with these memories as they're being deprogrammed and they're breaking free of this control. And they're like, yeah, I've seen the hybrid. Like, this is going to be the reality that ultimately, with the Great Awakening, the entire world embraces. And, for those of us that are on the forefront, the cutting edge, we're like, well, we know this is the world we live in now. And people are scared of that. They sometimes do rejection moves because they're like, we don't want to hear it. Thank God for you, Katie. But I mean, it's all going to come out. It's all going to come out. And I promise you that we're going to be better for it, because when we can at least, it's like, this is what I feel people are dealing with right now. People that consider themselves targeted individuals, people that have heavy demonic problems. They've been to this ministry, maybe they got a little breakthrough here or there, but there's major problems that still are unrelenting. They're like, I don't know why God doesn't love me. And it's like, has nothing to do with the love of God. It has to do with the fact that you're trying to solve complex, like derivative equations in calculus with the plus sign. Like, the only thing we've known to do are like basic addition and subtraction. And we haven't understand or had the tools to actually solve the real problem. And there's been a real commitment in certain areas of society, whether it's the psychology community, or even unfortunately sometimes in the very body of Christ, to say we will not accept the size of the problem. We're going to reject the size of the problem. We're going to say if you can't get your solution at the level of plus and minus, you don't deserve a solution. We're just not going to go there with you. And people have been left feeling crazy. They've been left feeling gaslit. They've been left feeling rejected by God. And the truth is, this is my heart. I tell people, I didn't make me weird. Like y'all made me weird, because I decided I was just going to go there with Jesus. Like, Jesus, whatever you need me to do, believe, understand, figure out so that you can heal somebody, I'll go there. I'll take the hits. I'll take the blows. I'll take the backstabs, because I love your people and I love you. And so he's like, yeah, we got one. And so now I'm weird. But it's like the actual fruit is undeniable, because we're getting people set free from stuff that is off the charts. And the fruit is self-evident. Like, we see people having marriages fixed and finances fixed and sleep fixed. I talk to people, they haven't been able to sleep without getting tormented, held down at night, and nightmares their whole life. And, we get done with some of our ministry, they sleep good, their diet's fixed. Now they're able to exercise and quality of life improves. But what was their deliverance? We were having to have Jesus take out transhuman genetics from their body for the deliverance to process through. And so this is where our world has gone. I mean, we've all right, now
you're on the right show. Look, I've been called a weirdo for my entire Christian walk. Forerunning stuff got me kicked out of churches. I've lost a bunch of big gigs for people that came and said, well, we can't have her on, she talks about snakes. Snakes is nothing compared to this. This is really happening.